be. So why would anyone even want to get into this situation?
Well, you'd have to persuade him that it was good for him as well as good for us, and quite a lot of it is a bit zero.
But he feels if it's good for us, that means he must be losing. This is how he thinks. This is what he says.
I think it's more than just him wanting good for America. He actually wishes America's, he might call them friends, but he sees them as competitors. He thinks it's zero sum, and he wants them to lose in some sense. And even I completely agree with Manveen. It's unlikely that we'll get a good deal, but even if we did get a good deal, it would then be called a carve-out, which would be a special deal for Britain and not, for instance, for Europe. And I don't think that's the way forward. I think we need solidarity.
Well, look, so Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU Commission, says the West as we knew it is dead. Is that right? Is that going a step too far? Is it perhaps not just sleeping or very unwell?
I think it's got a sort of 3-day fever, and I'm a bit wary of saying that the world has changed and nothing will ever happen as it used to in the past. I think that we have got an American president who has basically lost his wits, and sooner or later I've enough faith in the United States to think that their system will get rid of him, and I think we may revert to something like normal.
Well, so Jeff Hoon, the former European defence minister, has experience of dealing with a controversial US president, George W. Bush in his case. He told Times Radio what he believes is the best path for Britain to take here.
I think there's no doubt that we need, in the interests of British business, to move much closer to the European Union. There are clearly red lines that we must not cross, and the Prime Minister had rightly set those out. But at the same time, we need to recognise that 40% of our trade remains with other EU countries. We have to find ways in which we can work more closely together with our closest neighbours.
Manveen, that makes a lot of sense, but at a time when the government is worried about losing support to reform in all kinds of places, there's a real political cost to being told, well, we're basically sort of, recreating the EU by stealth, rejoining the EU by stealth.
There would be, had this happened a year ago. I do genuinely think, though, there is a huge cultural change that has happened in the last few months, too. I think people are so worried by what they see of Donald Trump and America. In the old days, part of the argument used to be that the Liam Foxes would sort of say we should leave Europe behind to pivot towards a closer relationship with America. That's where our interests really lie. Very few people would make that argument now. I think there is such fear, particularly when it comes to defence, on what America might do, that actually having a relationship with, as Ursula von der Leyen, and, I'd never really sort of, it's like a good thing to us, it will to other people too, that it opens up a world of trade with the rest of the world, and maybe we sort of should be rethinking how much we rely on America for our output.
I mean, Matthew, closer relations with the EU for the UK, that's, so much of our politics of the last 10 years has been about not having that.
Yes.
Is this really an avenue that's open for the government?
Yes, I think it is now open. I think they're perhaps a little timid to realise that it's open, and it's probably open even in the Midlands and the North. You say there'll be a political cost for the Conservative Party, for instance, to say that we need to move closer to Europe. There would, but there'll be a political cost for anything that the Conservative Party says that indicates that it's made up its mind, which it hasn't. There will be a political cost in terms of the south of England, much of London, and much of the west of England, if the Conservative Party starts to pivot more towards both Trump and towards reform. Watch out for the Lib Dem results in the upcoming local government elections. The Conservative Party has got to remember that it's capable of losing support on its left as well as on its right.
Well, this brings us back, Matthew, to a piece you wrote in the Times at the start of the week, saying that Keir Starmer should be kicking ass, not kissing it.
Yes.
Explain.
Well, I believe in retaliation, or at least in threatening retaliation. It is true that nobody wins from a trade war, but that is the weapon that you can then use when somebody threatens you with tariffs. You can say nobody's going to win from a trade war, but we will fight our corner in the trade war, which is what China is doing. So the fact that nobody wins from a trade war is actually a weapon to be used when arguing or when threatening retaliation. We must threaten retaliation. Europe is kind of threatening retaliation, and we've got to stick with them.
So I'm just not sure, and Manvi needs to know what you think about this. I'm just not sure we're in the same situation as almost anybody else. Like China, I mean, China has both a lot to lose and a lot to win here. Canada has to retaliate because they're being sort of done over so harshly by the United States that there's no point in rolling over, because you roll over, you get trampled, you might as well fight back. They've been put in a position where they haven't got much to lose. And the EU can inflict great damage on the United States because the EU is economically so mighty. We're just not really in that situation. Maybe it's right to just keep our heads down and channeling George Orwell, do what I called in the past the do it to Julia strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why that's the path that Keir Starmer seems to be pursuing. I just don't know if it's realistic. When you sort of say we're in a different boat to everyone else, I think we are, but it's superficial. Most of it is just words. And I wonder how much of that will change after the royal visit, when they've got nothing to look forward to. At the moment, we're told we have a special relationship. We have closer reciprocal relations than the rest of Europe. What has it actually got us? The 10% tariffs were far higher than they would have been if they'd actually just calculated using their formula, because we have a much more balanced trade relationship with America than anyone else, and yet we still got 10% tariffs. Russia didn't, and it wasn't because of sanctions. Russia did have trade with America over the last year. Russia got nothing. So we're not in that special a position.
Well, maybe that just shows we're not sucking up hard enough.
Or maybe they don't respect us because we're sucking up. And I sort of think you've got to go back to the psychology of Trump. If we were sucking up and it was working. So I think the only person who's really managed to pull that off, Maloney's trying it too. We'll wait and see how that works. But the only person who's really pulled it off is Alexander Stubb, the Finnish Prime Minister, who went and played golf with Donald Trump for one day and managed to manipulate him into changing his mind and making that statement about being, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to repeat it on the radio, but I sort of think the alliteration is good, pissed off with Putin. And, sort of saying maybe I was tricked by Putin into undermining Zelensky. We didn't think we'd ever hear him say that. He said that after one day of playing golf with Alexander Stubb. We haven't managed to get any kind of concession that compares with that. If we were sucking up well, it would be different. I don't think we are.
And will there be a royal visit? I know that initially
I think they should keep changing the date.
They were saying even early summer. I don't think. You couldn't...
I think they should make it the last year of Donald Trump's presidency.
You can't imagine him visiting Balmoral now, can you? I mean, there'd be demonstrations everywhere. It would be horrible.
Well, it's quite hard to get to Balmoral, so that's a plus. I mean, like genuinely,
yes.
You can imagine him flying into some US airbase in Scotland, and sort of quietly going to Balmoral and there being loads of photos. You can't imagine him coming to London.
There are already
no way.
huge protests around his golf courses there,
Yeah.
and lots of graffiti and things, which apparently the government has been apologising for, which I don't know why.
I mean, if you think back to last time he came here, like a Regent's Park was full of people playing what they called vuvuzelas to keep him awake all night, which I thought was, alone, the fact that he'd be having to...
rather awkward for the king, too, if Canada is
absolutely
in the crosshairs.
Impossibly awkward. But I guess it is a good thing to keep dangling because he wants it.
Yes, save it for the last year.
Look, moving on, we're going to be talking about a summer of discontent and whether that's worse than a winter of discontent on account of it being smellier when the bins are overflowing. And also things like what a woman is and whether there should be ID cards. Easy stuff like that. So stick with us here. But first, let's get the news with Tom Noonan.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thank you, Hugo. Good morning. A minister has told Times Radio it will vary from place to place which facilities like bathrooms and changing rooms trans people should use, following yesterday's Supreme Court ruling. Karen Smith says trans people still need appropriate access to preserve.
A heart attack can happen.
Is a lecturer in public law at the University of Glasgow. His work was cited in the case. He told Times Radio what rights a gender recognition certificate will still grant a trans person.
Most of those areas will be things that predominantly concern the interaction between the individual and the state. So it will be things like the records of your birth certificate or marriage certificates or death certificates. But it won't automatically apply to areas that come up against the rights of other people, which are ordinarily dealt with within our anti-discrimination law.
The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in Paris for talks about the future meeting the French President Emmanuel Macron and other officials, including Ukrainian officials who are in the French capital. Robotic systems that can help remove tumours have been approved for use on the NHS in England. Some allow surgeons to perform operations using mechanical arms controlled from a console. And in football, Liverpool captain Virgil van Dijk has signed a new 2-year contract. It means the club, which is on course to win the Premier League, will hold on to him and star forward Mohamed Salah after months of speculation about whether they'd stay beyond this season. For a roundup of the news on demand, you can subscribe to the Times News Briefing podcast.
This is Times Radio.
The modern workplace isn't just one place. It's anywhere and everywhere you need it to be. That's why BT and EE empower your workforce to work seamlessly and securely.
And this actually starts with a really creative process, reimagining all the ways that your function